Hello, everyone. It's good morning and good afternoon and good night for a few of you. Welcome for one more session. Now we have Kadambar Sahu. I'm pronouncing your name correctly, right?
Yeah, you are.
Perfect. So Kadabari is a award-winning designer, and we've been talking about this. Like she won multiple awards. I would suggest you check her profile on LinkedIn. And design leader working as a senior vice president at Value Labs in India. She founded user experience group at Value Labs and is currently leading like more than 50 designers to create world-class and award-winning products and service to have a positive impact in business. So like Kadambari is the perfect profile of a world-class designer, if I can say. And she's like a definitely inspiration for one of us here. He's someone that I believe we aspire to be one day. So Kadabari, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Gudane. If I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Um,
Yes.
so just let me know if you can see my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, I can
Yeah.
see it.
So today I'm gonna thanks for your wonderful words, Gudane. It's really nice to share some of my thoughts, practices, ideas towards how might we challenge stereotypes and what I have done in my practice that can be incorporated, which can make more inclusive environments and worlds and everything that we design. So before we go ahead and talk about challenging stereotypes, let's first talk about what stereotypes are and how can that impact us. So stereotypes are these oversimplified, generalized idea that people within certain groups share the same characteristic. Now, there's a lot of problem with this, right? We all know that we fall into various social groups, cultural groups, identity, and various things, but we are individuals at heart. We have our own dreams, aspiration, our qualities, our abilities that are independent of the group, and that's why people don't function solely as a member of group. And this whole idea of just being a part of group and they have distinct qualities is ridiculous. And we've seen this kind of stereotypes in many ways, right? Be it cultural, gender, age, many others. And you can also spot it when you say something like this, like all Indians are, or all women are. Most of the time, it might turn out to be a stereotype. Now, also, let's talk about like stereotypes. If they're positive, are they okay? I don't think so. There are many research which support the idea that stereotypes, even if they're positive, they are negative and they can be harmful. Now let's talk about why we need to challenge it. I did talk about that stereotypes are basically oversimplification of characteristics. It's basically reduction of individuals into just a group and certain characteristics, which means there's loss of individuality and identity when we look at it. Um, this, if it has these stereotypes have negative connotation, it can lead to another place, which is discrimination. And in its extreme form, it can bring about racism, xenophobia, and incite violence. So we need to be extremely careful where and how these stereotypes can take us. Now, talking about as designers, how can we challenge it? According to me, I believe we can challenge it through our work, our attitude, and our practices. And I'm going to discuss some of these today with you. Starting with one of my projects, which is sniffing out the differences. So sniffing out the differences is a multisensory installation which actually talks about the modern conception of identity and how differences are created. It also uses a very unusual medium, which is smell, to talk about these sort of differences and identity that we deal with. Today, I'm not going to talk about the installation, but I'm going to talk about how these installations challenge these stereotypes and why these narratives are important. So when this project started, essentially what it was trying to do was it was trying to talk about the cultural identity of India and Indians. And trust me, when I looked at the references, I was in for a shock because most of the time, and literally it shouldn't have been a shock for me because how we represent our country in most of the popular media was very exotic. It was so stereotyped. It's like, you see India, you look at like busy bazaars, overcrowded streets, Taj Mahal, then you see hermits, you see snake charmers and elephants. I'm sure they are part of India, but they are not the India. They're not all of India. And that's why I thought it's a huge opportunity for us as designers who are working on this project to bring about this whole idea of what Indians are or what identity of India is. And that's why we thought that we need to tread it very carefully. India is a vast country with a lot of diversity, and we need to respect that. And how do we try to showcase that was one of our challenges. Identity, if it is not carefully portrayed, right, it can lead to a lot of stereotype. And that's the last thing that we wanted to do. So, in this regard, when we were looking at stories and we were trying to conceptualize things, we first looked at who we are. And as Indians, and with current things that are going on, mobility, progress that we have done in our country, what really happens is we live in certain part of the city or certain part of the country. Then for education, we go somewhere else. We are working somewhere else. So it's a lot of mobility that takes place. Now, what really happens is each of these regions have their own culture and they infuse with our own cultural identity. And then when we call ourselves just belonging to one ethnic group or one particular region, it's basically reductionism. So we thought to challenge this sort of thing through our installation, and we did it through identity stories, which is basically chronicles of everyday Indian. We also wanted to talk about not just people who are like, let's say great achievers, but some people who are like just common Indians, and in urban setting as well, from and even from villages. So we took one of our protagonists. We had two people whom we spoke to. We conducted good amount of research to understand their backgrounds, how mobility has brought about these changes in their identity, and we broke them down into small pieces of stories, which in itself were very light. But the actual thing really questioned and created dialogue among the audience. And it was about, first, who does the city belong to? Or why are we creating a lot of problems when people come from different parts of the country? So there's been a lot of xenophobic tendencies when you see in terms of migration, and this was being questioned with this particular installation. The whole part of identity was being questioned, where you're not talking about just a place you were born in or the ethnic group that you belong or language you just spoke. So it was amalgamation of everything. Apart from that, it also challenged the gender stereotype strongly. If you see, women around the world have been portrayed as settled only when they're married and they have kids. In this particular installation, our protagonist is a person who was born in a small town. She goes through various different cities and places to learn to actually create a career for herself. And she is the aspiration. And she's like many Indian girls today. And in her installation and in her biographical installation, she talks about that I am settled right now and I am looking for my Mr. Right. Where she's talking about she is looking for her partner, but it's not because she want to get settled. This whole thing that she's complete stands out very strongly in this narrative. And that's good. We need to bring about these kind of narratives to empower our girls, to make them understand that it's not just settle what meaning we need to give when we are only married and we have kids, but it is more than that. And how do we talk about ourselves? This also resonated with a lot of audience that we had, the younger audience who came to visit and saw this installation. The second I would want to talk about in this series of installation was one where we were talking about these struggles and deep divisions in the war-torn region, the conflict zone of Kashmir. At this point of time, we wanted to make sure that we are representing people authentically. There's no exaggeration for just winning sympathy. And for this, one of our teammates, Devanshu Bhaume, he actually went to Kashmir, stayed with the people, did his research, wrote those poems, which were part of the installation, and then he checked and validated for the emotionality. We were very conscious about not exaggerating. When we're dealing with sensitive subjects, we also need to look, we always need to look for this thing, that we're not exaggerating to win sympathy. We shouldn't do anything for popularity or for personal gains. When we are trying to portray people, we should do it authentically, and that's what the whole care aspect of Mir Abdul Attarwala installation was for us. While these two installations talked about people, right? And I think the direct opposite of getting anybody's stereotype or creating stereotype is actually getting to know people, and that can be done through research, by empathy, by actually having unconditional care for people you're designing for and people that you are representing. So that's what these two installations talked about. Now I'm going to talk about the extreme thing, which was Jallianwala Bagh. So about 100 years ago, Jallianwala Bagh massacre happened. Um, and basically, what the story went like this, where General Dyer came in, he blocked the exit and the entrance and fired indiscriminately on people who were innocent, who were just peacefully demonstrating. When we question that how some human can actually stoop so low to fire on people who are innocent, women, children, who are just peacefully demonstrating, the only thing that comes to our mind when we look at this is that sometimes these discriminations means that you're reducing people to just others, and then you stripping them of their individuality and personhood. Only then you can create such kind of violence. And Jallianwala Bagh for us was not just an installation where we are just looking at our past. We are seeing today in popular times the kind of polarization that's happening around in the entire world, and that's how this installation deals with. This installation is not just about going to a historical story and talking about it, but it is actually about digging the past. So if you look at the installation, it is actually like an excavation site that you would go, and then the artifacts that you would unearth. It's about going into the past, understanding it, so we can avoid any sort of these kind of discrimination in the future. And that's what the subject of Jallianwala Bagh dealt with. While this is like a place where we are directly dealing with identity, we're directly dealing with xenophobia and directly dealing with a lot of these sort of social issues, we do have scope even in our regular UX work. And when I say that, trust me, we have a lot of impact when we are designing systems and applications. Our software applications, our designs have huge impact on it. Let me first talk about like a simple tool that can be totally be used to stereotype and mislead, and that's persona for you. When I look at majorly many junior designers, what they do is they think that persona is a hypothetical fictional character that you create to spin around a story for your particular design. Partly yes, partly not, because how we use it is not about just creating something which is fictional. How we go about solving this sort of problem of not stereotyping is by first understanding the business requirement or the requirements, constructing something which is, yes, hypothetical at the first phase. But then what we try to do is we actually go ahead, conduct research, we talk to people, we understand their life, their day in life, their pain points, their issues that they face, how it is about looking from their point of view. We empathize with them, and then we aggregate those behaviors, and then we create persona. Also, another issue that I have often seen when people construct persona is generally he. And it comes from historicity in a way. Because in language earlier, when we used to talk about he, it used to be universal. And when we talk about she, it is generally a niche, which has changed, right? We do talk about they now as users, and we have shifted strongly from he to they. It's not just language though, but it is also the mindset and perceptions that we bring into the table when we are designing. Because if we have something in our mind and if we always think about him, then we will design always for him, and we will lose out a lot of different aspects that we need to consider for careful design. Speaking from our examples, when we look at designing any system, product, or services, we look at it from a broader angle. We look at it from service design, we look at it from universal design principles. And what do I mean by that? When I'm saying creating for all, it's not designing generically. It is about understanding the whole system, the ecology, and whom are we impacting when we are designing. End user, designing for end users is only a part of the story. How should we create? How might we create for people who are impacted through it? And for this, we classify them into various personas that can come up based on what kind of impact it will create for them. So for example, we have customer persona, people who would pay, people who are decision makers, people who are primary users, people who might be supporting in this particular application or system or services. There are also people who are not going to come to your system or your application, but they are directly impacted. And they are called serve persona. So let me talk a little bit more about what serve persona is. Let's say that we are designing something for doctor, right? But if you're designing an instrument for doctor is going to use it on patients, and that's how the impact would come along. It is going to be impacting the patient, and patient need to feel comfortable when these kind of tests or whatever doctor is going to do. So for this, we need to also consider when we are designing certain instrument of this sort, not only just the doctor or patient, but also nurses who are going to give them care. And that is what I talk about creating for all. So basically using service design principles and universal design principles to talk about not only just people, but also touch points and how it is going to be used. It's imperative to keep the various lenses when we are designing. One is strongly, I suggest, of gender, social, cultural, and ability wise as well. Accessibility is another thing that we need to keep in mind when we are designing anything. Even if it is an information website, we need to see, like, not only it is working for people who are differently abled or impaired, but also for people who might be in remote areas and would want to access this sort of information, especially in the times like ours. We need to make sure that it is accessible in various ways from various devices in various formats, right? So all these sort of things we need to consider when we are looking at it. Even the smallest part of user interface, right? Icons are extremely important. Put them in a condition and context where it is, part of life saving, and it becomes totally unignorable. And that's why we need to have cultural understanding, contextual understanding, and understanding of everything that can make that icon be intuitive in this part. Next, I would like to talk about gender. And I'm not going to talk in terms of what I have done, but also something that I would like to totally encourage you guys to see. Just a part about infrastructure, right? Women and men use infrastructure very differently. And these sort of case studies that you will find in some of the articles like Cities for Women and 99% Invisible, where they have totally devoted this topic. Now, let me come back not only on this, but how did we incorporate? While I did talk about persona, I did talk about persona ecology and service design and universal design principles that we apply in our design. Let me now talk about privacy concerns, and specifically taking an example of voice enabled interactions that we were doing in one particular project of ours. So at this point of time, we did our research. We knew that the device was quite new. So we also spoke to the hardware vendor. We understood each and everything about the device, and we also understood about the context. Now comes the part where we are actually creating scenarios. When we were creating scenarios and stories, what we really talked about is I can't really not emphasize the part of role playing. So here we were testing conditions as to how things can be. While it is extremely fun to do this, what really got to us was a great insight which we were looking at. Now here what we were trying to look at is that there's a technician who's taking some of the information from a person. The first instance, we took the person as a man, and we took all of these things from there. Later on, the same thing, when we switched it with the women, we had this heightened sense of privacy concern that came into fore. I'm not saying that men don't have privacy concern. It's just that when we switched the character to a women, it was much heightened. Not only that, we also looked into the context of that what if there are problems in terms of when we are looking at environment where there is a lot of noise. How do we talk about that? How do we take information on those scenarios, and what can be different modalities that we can use and try to make this thing inclusive? So not only we used voice enabled interactions, but we also made sure that we are using other secondary interactions baked into it. So people, if they have problem with the surrounding, or let's say one fine day the person who's supposed to give the information has sore throat, how would that conditions be like? So systematically we looked at each and every scenario, and these scenarios we constructed to test it out. And that is how I think that inclusivity can be brought about, by understanding the scenarios, understanding the context, and then bringing out solutions to it. Let me now talk about some of the other things, which is attitude and practices. we need to challenge stereotypes head on. And this can also mean the way and what we practice. So, for example, let's talk about designers. There's this huge demand for people who are unicorns, people who can do everything from icon to UI to interaction to research to everything under the sun. But we challenged this. When I was building the team at Valley Labs, we looked at, how should we create an inclusive environment so people can contribute, at their best, and comfortably in a way that they are challenged in the way that, the problem requires them to think, but not in a place where they go in a very different direction. So rather than fitting people into the roles, what we tried to do is we looked at people's abilities, and then we tried to look at, where they can contribute. And that's one of the ways we broke stereotype in terms of not having a unicorn set of designers, but designers who come in and then they discover themselves as whether they're interaction designer, animators, whatever they are, based on their preferences. We try to model them and create space for them so they can do their best work. Let's now talk about something which directly has impacted me over years of my life that I have lived. Um, First thing was when I was doing my bachelor's in technology, and I was an engineer at that point of time. Many people told me, "Oh, you're a girl and you're an engineer." So I was like, "Yeah, there are many people like me." So that was one stereotype that people held strongly during those days, that engineers mean men. Apart from that, when I grew up and I went into design, and then when I traveled abroad and met people, people were always like, "Oh, you're Indian and you're a designer." I thought Indians are generally engineers, or I've never come across any Indian designers. But what was said in the surface, there were a lot of other connotations, which meant, "Are you good enough? Is that really something that Indians can do?" So there's a lot of these undertones which were there with these kind of statements, which I could feel. Now, we don't mean that always their stereotypes can only come from other side. Sometimes it is also within from our group. There's so much of colonized mindset that I had to deal with when people said that, "Oh, we can't be as great as them." And I said, "Then why? Why not? And maybe you cannot be, but I can." Because the problem is that if you do not challenge these stereotypes, it will not only limit you, but generations. And that's very negative thing, right? So we need to take these as challenge and then build ourselves and empower people around us. So this was head on, a challenge through my work, which won a lot of recognition, which won lot of business impact in terms of positive, creating business impact positively. And that's why I could prove these people wrong in terms of how you can impact. It's not skin of your color or nationality. It's about who you are and what you are practicing, right? Your abilities and your skill set and your mindset and behavior, that will define where you go and what you create for yourselves. Next, which most of the designers will encounter and have encountered, is that designers make things pretty or beautiful. While this might irritate us, but we need to take this as an opportunity to really create awareness about our discipline, to let people know that what we really are capable of and what is the value of design. For this is something of a personal mission to me as well, which I am doing currently, taking Value Labs as our platform, and my team user experience group as people who come together to create awareness. And we started Design Inspired in 2020 and brought some amazing designers from throughout the world who talked about design. And we are here to really create awareness one episode at a time and take it higher to create design for everybody. So that's the mission for Design Inspire. Now, coming back to me in terms of women leaders, right? In many in most of the creative fields actually, and in creative colleges, you will find there are so many women, there are so many girls. But when you look at design leadership, or for that matter any leadership roles, you'll find that women leaders are very sparse. They're almost invisible, and if they're sometimes there, they're there for diversity check. Of course, there are very strong women which are there, and they have fought, they have done this whole fighting to reach there. But this is one aspect that I see, that um, that women leaders are not really there a lot in this space. Some part of the problem can also be, or issues that we have not really acknowledged, is that women and men lead differently. Women leadership styles are different, and if we only think that men leadership style are the one that we need to take ahead, then we are really impacting half of the population. So we need to create inclusivity not just in design but also in our systems, so more people can be part of it. Lastly, I would like to encounter this notion of too young or too old, right? And this we see so much. Um, for example, job description. They'll ask you if you have 10 years of experience or 15 years of experience or 2 years of experience, and all sort of range. But what I really want to confront, and we have confronted by adopting some of the practices in Value Labs as organization, is that we are meritocratic institution organization, and what we really look at is we look at people with skills, mindset, and ability to do their best work. We don't look at how much experience they have. In some terms, it comes as if for leadership you require so many years of experience, but what we really look at is if they have the ability to lead, or if they have ability to do the things that are that job requires. So we believe that we don't have to just add years to our experience, but we need to add experience to the years that we have. But this is towards too young. What about too old? In tech industry, we have always seen, and in many cases we have seen, that people do discriminate on people who are maybe older, because they think that technology is for maybe young, or they do not understand. But I highly confront this notion as well, and I think that people need to be taken individually. We need to create inclusive environments where everybody can be part of. So I want to sum this up by taking some of the quotes from my mentor's book, where he describes beautifully the idea of what design is. So he says that beyond the design of artifact or service to solve problem, to design is to able to give voice to people, often the poor, the marginalized. To design is to be able to construct futures that restores dignity and nurture people's aspiration. And I can't agree more. In fact, I believe done right, design is activism, and design is activism done right. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic closing. I really loved it. Done right, design is activism. We have two questions here. One from Ovi Paul. So Ovi asks, are stereotypes always a bad thing?
I think stereotypes are bad thing. They're always bad thing in many cases, because even if, as I talked about, even if they are positive, they can be negative. For example, let's say that all Indians are engineers, which I talked about, right? So we are restricting the identity of Indians per se, that they're only engineers and they're not capable of doing anything else. Even if that might be positive in certain cases, it restricts us, right? By not pursuing the chances or opportunities that may be offered in the other field. So that's why I think even if when it is positive, it is negative. We need to consider people as individuals with different preferences, orientations, goals, abilities, and give them the opportunity to come up with best that they can do in their lives.
Okay, thanks. Then the next one is from Ifoloa. Sorry if I'm misspelling your name. Is asking, how can one manage or handle backlash as a result of challenging stereotypes?
Oh, I can't tell you how much I have also been in there when as I talked about, right? It should be done through three aspects which I have dealt in my life: through attitude, through work, and through practices. Attitude should be that if people tell you that you are not good enough, or because you are from certain nationality, race, ethnic group, or whatever, you need to just call that out as bullshit. You need to understand that this is a wrong preconception, and we should always remember that other people's perception should not limit us. So that attitude you need to create for yourself, where you're not really taking people's perception as your reality. And with that comes the second part, where you need to create a reality for yourself by understanding yourself and then getting on and creating your work and practices. When you do good work and you really present it to the world, there are a lot of chances that you will find a lot of encouragement. Thankfully, in design field, we are so progressive and we're always talking about inclusivity. So the often than not, people would come to your come to encourage you in terms of what you're trying to do. I hope I've answered this. And if there's follow-up question, please let me know. I'll try to answer best as possible.
Okay, we're trying to follow up here. So Simeon Jr. is asking, how can we use design stereotypes to categorize brands or companies under a set of visual attribution or principles?
I did not get the question. How can we use design stereotype to categorize brands, or companies under a
Yes,
set
all
of...
companies.
So it's not really
Yes.
stereotype as much as personality. So when we try to look at, like, for example, let's say one of our project was creating Value Labs brand personality. So we're not really stereotyping. What we are trying to what we are trying to do is effective communication.
Okay.
So yeah. So for example, with Value Labs, it was about doing the right thing was the main message that we were trying to portray. You're also trying to portray a lot of other qualities of being young, being dynamic. So all of these things, what you try to do is you try to construct a personality for the brand. So when you're talking to your people or anybody from your company is talking to people outside, they understand what we stand for and firmly. So that actually comes in the part of designing for designing a brand identity and creating value in terms of how brand identity can be used to talk about or articulate our values to our customers, to our people.
Okay, last question is, how do stereotypes affect performance and perceptions?
Oh, they affect a lot, and that's why we need to be very careful as to what we are doing to our people, or what kind of biases do we have. If we always think that, let's say, if we think that women are always good at colors and things like that, let's say if that's a stereotype we come up with, also biology supporting that women can see a lot more colors than men, and then there's a position for colorist. Without even testing our assumptions in terms of who is better suited for the job, if I come with the bias that I only want a women candidate, then it can be a problem, right? We need to create environment where we test our assumption when we see who is better suited for the job. It should be from the meritocratic angle when we look at these sort of things, right? So if we come with bias, it can be problem. Even same thing with leadership, right? If we are looking at a person who might be very young but is suited for the position, and if they can lead with brilliance, then why not? Why make this a problem, a hindrance that this person requires like 10 years or 12 years of experience? So this definitely gives a problem in terms of how you look at others. So for example, if you are in the position of hiring or making a call, and you are calling the shots, then it's affecting the other person. It can be other way around. As I talked about, in certain social groups there are inherent issues, like a very colonized mindset where we think as group what we can or we cannot do. Like for example, many a times people told me that, okay, Indian designs, or Indians cannot design as much great as Europeans or North Americans and things like that. I said that's a bullshit. I said, what it has got to do with my nationality? It has got to do with my ability, and I think I can do it well. So but if I am not strong enough, if I take these things to my heart, and it does go to my heart, right? It boils my blood when people do this kind of stuff. But then what really happens is that I look at it for an opportunity to prove them wrong. Not every time you will get that. So you need to be very careful as to what you do to yourself. But I think the best thing would be not to take other people's perception for you. You need to create your own. You need to understand what you are, rather than people telling you what you can or you cannot do. You get one life, right? I hope that you do not make it based, living of your life based on other people's perception. You need to challenge those.
Oh, fantastic closing. A second fantastic closing. Thanks, Kadambari. Like this was a very inspiring session. If people have more questions, we're gonna collect and redirect later, and we're gonna try to find a way to answer them.
Sure.
But going next for the next session, we have adapt list one-on-one mentor sessions. So those are only for people who receive the emails. So please check your emails and log with the emails that you use to create your account on Hover, the platform that we're using for the conference. Once again, thank everybody for your time,
Thank
and see you next time.
Yeah, do connect with me if you want to know more or have a general chat. And thank you. Namaste. I'm signing off. Bye bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.